Indeed, it is only the knowledgeable among His servants who truly fear Allah. Middle Path Radio, your source of Islamic knowledge.
Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. So inshallah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we will be going through a short 4-week course, glances at the lives of Islamic leaders, or glances at the lives of great Islamic personalities. And there is no other to start with than the Prophet ﷺ. But before we get into the Prophet ﷺ and speak about the Prophet ﷺ, we will discuss history, a brief introduction to history. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, because history is a very large topic and is something that you can literally talk about for hours, especially when it comes to Islamic history. So we will try to give a concise introduction to history. Together we'll try to discuss a few issues and look into what is Islamic history. Jazakallah khair. Bismillah. So, can anybody give me a definition? What is history? You're smiling, akhi, so I'm guessing you got something. La.
Past events.
Past events. Anyone else? There's no right or wrong answer.
Stories from the past.
Stories from the past. Interesting choice of words. Anyone else?
Recorded facts.
Recorded facts. Again, interesting choice of words. Ibn Athir, rahimahullah ta'ala, a famous Shafi'i scholar and historian and scholar of hadith, he says something about history. We will come to it inshaAllah, and he used these two words, stories and facts, or stories and information. So we'll see what he says about these two words inshaAllah. Anyone else? What is history? There's no right or wrong answer. Another way to put it is, why do we study history? Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
We study history to go in depth of historical figures, for example, the Prophet, and we derive from the events that he went through, and we go through what things we can learn from that one story.
So benefits and lessons. So the reason that we study history is to derive benefits and lessons from the events that have taken place in the past. Would everyone agree? This is the reason for studying history. So we can say that history is a study of events and personalities from the past, or the science of history, and recorded by past nations, past civilizations, historians, and it is studied so that we can derive benefits. And we'll come to mention some of the benefits of history. And I will make a statement. Of course, many may disagree with me, but I'll be very bold in saying, I believe that the most relative science to us as Muslims, and non-Muslims, but Muslims living in our current situation, is which science? History, without a doubt. Why? We'll come to see some of the benefits inshaAllah bi'idhnillah. طيب. So some of the things that have been mentioned about history is an Islamic history specifically. History is a heritage of our ummah and its treasure chest. History, no matter which country you go to, as a Muslim, you are connected to the Muslims in that land. And so the history of those Muslims is your history. If, for example, a young Bangladeshi brother were to go to Somalia, he has a direct connection to those people. Their history is his history. Their pride is his pride. Their losses are his losses. And so our history, Islamic history, is our heritage. Our heritage. And it is our treasure chest. Treasure chest of individuals. Treasure chest of strategies and plans. Treasure chest of lessons, practical lessons that we can implement directly in our lives. History is a measuring stick of a nation's greatness in regards to culture, civilization, and norms and practices. Today, for example, when we speak about Western culture, Western civilization, Western society, who do we measure it up against? past civilizations, right? We say, for example, that the Western culture, Western civilization is very advanced. How do we know it's very advanced? Because we've compared it to who? To those that came before us. And so history is a measuring stick, not only for nations, but for individuals. How do you know whether you are a person who has achieved something worthy of being praised? How do you know whether you are a person who is on the path to becoming someone great? By reading about great personalities of the past and comparing yourself to these people. It is a fountain of experience, reminders and strategies, as we mentioned. It is a fountain of experience, reminders and strategies. It's a celebration of our Ummah's great personalities. We have 1,400 and roughly 40 years of great personalities. In every single century, you will find hundreds upon hundreds, in fact thousands upon thousands of great individuals that you can read about. Starting from our time today, around us, in this masjid perhaps, we have great individuals that if we were to read about their lives and ask those who surround these people about their lives, we would be inspired to follow them. So history is a fountain, a treasure chest of great personalities who we can follow and try to aspire to be like. And this is in every single field, especially Islamic history. We only focus on military leaders, on political leaders, on scholars of hadith or fiqh or Quran, but we have leaders in every single field. Science, maths, medicine, philosophy, geography, psychology, every single field, economics, every single field that you would like to discuss, you can find great Islamic personalities who are at the head of the line when it comes to being a great person in their respected fields. It is a geopolitical study, a philosophical study, a sociological study, and a utensil of human experience. Who's heard of Ibn Khaldun? Ibn Khaldun from Tunisia. Ibn Khaldun wrote a very famous book. It was translated into many, many languages, and this book is studied today in Western universities. Until today, it is still studied by Western academics and Orientalists due to the significance of this book, Al-Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. And in it he speaks about history, he speaks about other sciences. And you could say that this was the introduction to anthropology, to sociology, to particular sciences related to humanities. There was no one that came before him that wrote such a book. And so until today, it is studied. Who's heard of Ibn Rushd? Ibn Rushd, what have you heard about him?
Historian and traveler.
I can't hear you, akhi.
Famous mathematician / scientist.
Ibn Rushd, he is famous for being a Maliki scholar, and he was also famous for his philosophy. In fact, some of the historians, Western historians, they say that the first exposure in the West to Aristotle was with the footnotes of Ibn Rushd, Averroes. Why is this significant? It's significant because Western society is built upon what? Upon Greek philosophy in certain parts. And so where did they take these works from? They didn't take it directly from the Greeks. They took it from who? From the Muslims. And so you find that even in Western society, who's heard of the canon? Who's heard of it? Not the big gun that shoots out. It was a book written by Fakhruddin al-Razi, a compendium in medicine. Until today, it is still a reference point in the science of medicine. Until today, it was one of the first books that the Western scientists in medicine benefited from in the field of modern medicine. And so we can find in every single field we have great leaders and great individuals that we can aspire to follow. Ibn Rushd. Before Ibn Khaldun. طيب. And so let's look at some of the definitions, some of the things that have been said. التاريخ علم يبحث فيه عن معرفة أحوال الطوائف وبلدانهم ورسومهم وعاداتهم وصنائعهم وأنسابهم ووفياتهم. So just briefly, Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Jibrti, he mentioned that history is a science in which the situation or the circumstances of nations and peoples and their norms and their practices and that which they used to make and their lineages and their dates of death are studied. Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, the famous mujtahid Hanbali scholar, he said, فينبغي للعقلاء أن يعتبروا بسنة الله وأيامه في عباده ودأب الأمم وعاداتهم. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, it is upon the people upon the people of intellect to take heed and to learn lessons from the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala في عباده وأيامه. The sunnah of Allah, the reoccurring principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that take place within His creation, the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mean by this? He means that if you boil water today at 100 degrees, tomorrow it's going to boil at what? 100 degrees. The same way, if oppression starts to become widespread in your state, tomorrow your state is going to what? Fall. And this is why there have been books that have been written, The Rise and Fall of Nations. Ibn Khaldun is very famous, he's quoted for mentioning these things. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah speaks about this. There are principles, there are rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has engraved into this life. If you work hard, you are going to get a result. If you do not work hard, you are not going to get a result. And by studying history, we come to learn these practices, we come to learn these principles, we come to learn these rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has engraved into His creation. And so we know what to avoid and what to follow. And there is something very special about Islamic history. We have over 1,400 years. It is the complete historic recording of the nation of Islam, not literally the nation of Islam, but the Ummatul Islam, the nations that make up the Ummah. It is a complete recording of, imagine how many continents. You have Africa, you have Middle East, you have Asia, you have the subcontinent. When I say Asia, I mean China and the lands that surround China, the subcontinent region, Eastern Europe, parts of South America. You have the recording of entire continents for over 1,400 and something years. There is no other nation, no other empire that has recorded their history from start until beginning except for our nation. You cannot find the complete history of the Greeks. You cannot find the complete history of the Romans from day zero up until their fall. You cannot find the complete history of the Persians from day zero up until their fall. And even if you could, you would not find that it is preserved the way our nation's history has been preserved. Why? We have something called al-riwaya, al-isnad. We have a chain of narration, even in history, where the person narrates from a person who narrates from a person who narrates from a person, and so we can check and make sure that what we are reading is authentic. You cannot find this with any other nation. And so we literally have a treasure chest of great lessons to learn from real-time events that took place. Andalus, for example, 800 years. The Ottoman Empire, 800 years. These two time periods in of themselves, 800 years of experience. We'll mention some of the statements of Ibn Athir rahimahullah ta'ala, who wrote a very famous book in history. Does anyone know its name? Al-Kamilu fi al-Tarikh. Very famous book, Al-Kamilu fi al-Tarikh. And he started from the beginning of our nation's history up until roughly his era. طيب, what does he say? What does he say about history and its importance? He says a person is the person that reads history. Listen carefully to what he says. He says a person is exposed to the experience and understanding of others by reading about past events, and comes to know what the end results of situations will be, as there is nothing which takes place except that it has taken place before it, or its like has taken place before it. And so this person's intellect increases, and he becomes a person worthy of being followed by others. Why? Because he is adding the past experiences of great leaders, great men, great nations to his experiences, and so he becomes a person who literally is worthy of being followed by others, worthy of giving advice to others. He becomes a leader in of himself. Some of the great leaders of the past, they said, I continued to read about the biographies of great men and great leaders and great personalities until I became one myself. And we see this today. If, for example, you look at a football player, you find that from a young age, he's reading about what? Football players. He's watching what? Football players. He's inspired by who? Football players. And he ends up becoming a football player. And so what if we, as the youth of Islam, if we were to read the biographies of these great men that have come before us, and we would continue to read and read and read and read, what would we become? And there's no difference between us and those that came before us, except for the hard work and the effort. There's a difference between us and the companions, no doubt. But after the companions, of course, every generation gets worse. But what I mean is, in regards to achievements, you find in every single century, there are great men of great achievements. And there's no difference. They are made of dust. They are the creation of Allah. And so we can follow their footsteps, and we can be men of great achievement. We can be individuals. When we pass away, our names live on in the pages of history. There are new blank pages of history, and they are waiting for the names of men to be written in them. And we have the opportunity to be from those men. All it takes is action and inspiration, and we have a whole treasure chest, as we mentioned, of inspirational men that we can follow. Al-Jabarti, Abdurrahman al-Jabarti, we mentioned, he's a famous Egyptian historian. He lived in the time of Napoleon, and he wrote a very famous book documenting what happened with the invasion of Napoleon in Egypt. A very important book for those that are studying colonialism. Al-Jabarti, his origin goes back to the Eastern African region. So either Somalia or Eritrea or Ethiopia, I'm not sure which, or Kenya, I'm not sure which part, but that's his asl. His grandfather went to Egypt and settled there. What did he say? He's a very famous historian. He has a very famous book, Tarikh Misr, the history of Egypt. He says, the science of history is an honorable science containing many great lessons, accounts and examples to follow. Through studying history, the intelligent person can compare himself to those who have preceded him in this life and take himself into account by comparing himself to the people that came before him. The great Imam al-Shafi'i radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, whoever studies and learns history increases in intellect. He said, Man alim al-tarikh zad aqlahu. Whoever learns and studies history increases his intellect. Ibn Khaldun said, history is a great science and subject of immeasurable benefits and lessons, a science of noble purpose and aims, revealing to us the state of past nations and civilizations and those they left behind, the prophets and their biographies, the kings and their states, kingdoms and political systems, providing us with examples to be followed for those who wish to do so in both the deen and in the dunya. Ibn Athir, he also said, and this is very important to listen to. Why? There are some people, there are some individuals, they look down upon the science of history. They will say, especially you find this amongst those that study Islamic sciences, they'll say, for example, history is not important. What is important is tafsir or fiqh or aqidah or lugha, and those subjects are important. But when it comes to tarikh, history, they don't even open a book in history. And they'll tell people, don't waste your time. There are more important things to be studied. What does Ibn Athir have to say about that? Remember, he was a famous Shafi'i faqih, a famous scholar of hadith, and a famous historian. What does he have to say about this? He says, I have seen a group of individuals, meaning a jama'ah, a large amount of people, who claim to have understanding and comprehension in the religion, thinking that they have reached great heights and superiority in knowledge and narrations. Yani, they've studied all of the sciences, they have knowledge of hadith, knowledge of fiqh. Yet they look down on history and they despise it, whilst thinking that the purpose of history is merely stories and facts and information. As the two brothers, someone said stories. Who was it? And he said facts, sah? طيب. So akhi, are you from these people, yeah? So, says thinking that the purpose of history is merely the narration of stories and news of the past and facts and information. And the reality is this is the state of a person who merely suffices himself with the skin of a fruit and not the fruit itself. And the reality of this person is like someone who goes to a fruit, for example a banana, and he suffices himself with the skin of the banana. He doesn't peel the banana open and eat from the banana and benefit from its nutrients and from its vitamins and from the energy that you obtain from a banana. Rather, he looks at the skin and he's happy at looking at the skin. This is what he's saying. This is the reality of these individuals. However, whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants an upright nature and guides to the straight path will know that the benefits of history are both vast and great, both for the dunya and the akhirah. To summarize, I'll read one more. He says, from its benefits, one lessons patience and takes solace in knowing that the people that came before them, the people that read history, suffered, as you'll see, which are from the best of character traits. Why? As the intelligent person, when he looks to find that those who have come before him were tested, regardless whether they were from the prophets or the kings or other than them, he realizes that that which afflicted them will come to afflict the readers, and that which they missed out on will also be missed out on by the readers. And this is something which is very important for us today. What is the relation between this statement and what we're going through? We see that we are having difficulties come up against us in practicing Islam, in holding on to Islam. What did the Prophet ﷺ say to Khabbab radiallahu ta'ala anh, when he came to the Kaaba? He said, Ya Rasulullah, you see what we are in. You see the trials and the tribulations that we're being put through. Can you not make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make things easy for us? What did the Prophet ﷺ say to him? He didn't say make dua. He didn't say stay patient. He didn't say fear Allah. He didn't give him a reminder. He didn't say pray. He didn't say fast. What did he say? He reminded him of the past nations. He gave him a history lesson to keep him firm, teaching us to take lessons from those that have come before us so that we may remain upon what they were upon, which is being firm upon Iman and showing strength and resilience in the face of hardship. What did he say? He said, verily, those that came before you, they would be taken and be put in front of the people, and their skin would be separated from their muscles and their body with a metal comb. Why? Because of their Iman, just because they were believers. And this would not turn them away from their Iman. This would not turn them away from their faith. But you are hasty people. The Prophet ﷺ said this to the Sahaba. You are hasty people. Someone that studies history will learn to have patience. Why? As we'll see by looking at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, how old was he when revelation came to him? 40. He remained for roughly 20 years. What happened? He didn't see the expansion of Islam. He didn't see the expansion of Islam. The victories and the expansion of Islam came after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, who was he? Who was he? Huh? Oh, what did he achieve?
Defeat the Crusades.
The young brothers, what did Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi achieve? Anyone know? He defeated the Crusaders in Jerusalem and he recaptured Al-Quds. How long did it take him? How long? Roughly 80 years. How is that possible? Because he wasn't the one that started. Imaduddin al-Zinki started. Nuruddin al-Zinki followed him. And Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was the one that was granted success. So it was an 80-year project. Patience. And where do we attain understanding like this? From reading history. So to summarize, that which has been mentioned is that history is a blueprint of application, a blueprint of strategies, and a source of understanding for us to implement. A person who has studied Quran, studied Hadith, studied Fiqh, studied Arabic, studied Aqidah. Now what? Now what does he do? If he were to read history, he would be granted many strategies that he can try to implement and emulate. And this is the benefit of history. And those that read history will be inspired to make change. Why? Because they'll see that it does not matter what background a person comes from. As Abu al-Hasan al-Nadwi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, I have read through history and I have found that poor people, rich people, people that come from an educated background, people that come from an uneducated background. Their stations have been raised. They made an impact. They became great men. It's just about the person making a difference and starting and aspiring to be a great person. So we'll quickly go through the importance and need for the understanding of Islamic history. Just to mention some points quickly. Number one, nobody can suffice themselves of history. All of us are in need of it for various reasons: religious, political, economic, sociological, academic. Every single person is in need in history. The core sciences of Islam are in need of history. For example, hadith. How do we know that a narration is authentic? We check, not us literally, we have our ulama, our muhaddithin that have done this for us. But how would they do it? They would check, Fulan, did he meet with Fulan? What year did he die? What year was he born? They'll check the history of these individuals and say, okay, yes, they met. So it's possible that this hadith was narrated by this individual. The scholars of fiqh, the scholars of Quran, every single individual is in need of history. Politicians, in economics. Some of the reasons why, we'll go into them more in detail. The religious need. One of the main benefits that a person will get from reading history is al-wasatiyya. To be a middle path person, to be a person be a just person, a person who is not far on the left or far on the right. History will rub away the extremities that a person may be inclined towards. An example, if you read the book by Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an, Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, the famous Imam and Muhaddith and Shafi'i faqih and historian, he said, he mentions some of the great Imams from the time of the Sahaba until his time. Over 5,000 biographies he put into this one book. Imagine, one person wrote a book that contains over 5,000 biographies. Look at the greatness of the scholars of Islam. If you read through this book and you read through some of the biographies, you'll be amazed. He'll mention great Imams, and then he'll mention some of the mistakes that they had, and he'll say things such as, this does not take away from his high level. Everyone has their mistakes. And so you learn to become middle pathed. You're not extreme on the left and you're not extreme on the right, by the permission of Allah, as history is a form of tarbiyah. History will nurture you. History will raise you. It will have a direct impact on you and you won't even realize that it's taking effect. The history specific to Islam and the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ led to many sciences being established. We briefly touched on this. The history and relationship of the Prophets. When does Islamic history start? It doesn't start with the Prophet ﷺ, it starts with Adam ﷺ. Why? Because all of the Prophets were Muslimun. All of them came with the Risalatul Islam. They came with the same message, but just different ahkam. History makes apparent and clarifies the reasons for the emergence of groups and ideologies which had a major impact in our ummah, and we see the impact up until today of these groups and ideologies. And we also see the way that the ulama and the people of wisdom reacted to these people. For example, how did Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala an react to the Khawarij? How did Ahmad ibn Hanbal and the scholars of that time react to the Mu'tazila? And so we see the reaction of the ulama, and you'll find that they were very balanced in their reaction. They were very balanced. They were not extreme. They were not harsh. The way that they reacted was based upon principles of Islam, not based upon emotions. And what should our stance be when we're dealing with these groups? How can we come together as an ummah? We learn this in history. History shows the stages of establishment that take place. How do we know which stage we've reached in regards to the establishment of a specific project? For example, we have a long-term vision. We would like to establish so-and-so in this community. How can we measure how far along we have come in regards to our establishment? How can we measure how long is left? How can we measure what do we need to do now? by studying history and looking at those that were successful in the establishment of projects and ideas within their communities. For da'wah, the benefits of history in da'wah: reading the details and biographies of great leaders, du'at, scholars, courageous warriors and men, zuhad, ubbad, emperors and others. Reading their details, not just what did they do, what did they achieve, but what made these men tick. Do we think, I'll ask a question now, what makes a successful scholar? What makes a successful imam? What makes a successful leader? Is it his charisma? Is it his speech? What are the answers? You tell me. Yani today, for example, there's a lot of focus on speaking. We have workshops in how to speak, workshops in how to, use the hands and choreography and so on and so forth. Right or wrong? If you go on TED, you can find loads of them. Raise your voice, lower your voice. Did the men of the past, were they focused on these things? Is this what made these men of the past great men? I'm not saying that there's no benefit in these things. I'm not. But what I'm asking is, what was it that made the men of the past great men?
That knowledge on what was most needed at the time.
Knowledge, that's a very good point. Knowledge on what was most needed at the time. The Muslihin, the Mujaddideen, the revivers of Islam focused on what was most needed at their current time. For example, you didn't find in the time of the fuqaha that they were focusing on the jarh wa ta'dil. You don't find that at the time of invasion of the Crusades, they were bickering and arguing with themselves about where to place the hands. And you find that nations that did engage in these things, they ended up falling, such as the Murabitin. Akhi, you were going to say something?
It's the amount of effort they put into something, and the thing that they achieve and how it impacts the people, like not only them but like people around them.
So the impact, the effort that they put in is basically dictates the result that comes from the effort. That's what you're saying. That's a very good point as well. But there's other things. For example, their ibādah, their character, their vision. And one of the main things, ibādah. The ibādah between them and Allah is very well known. All four of the great Imams, Malik and Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i and Ahmad rahimahum Allah ta'ala jami'an, they all had great ibādah and relationships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ahmad would pray over 300 raka'at a night in qiyam. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiya an, he was walking and he heard a person say, that's Imam Abu Hanifa, the one that doesn't sleep at night due to him praying. He said, Ya Allah, if this is what people are saying about me, I have to do it, because I don't want people to say about me that which is not true. And so he began to stay up, praying all night, reading Quran, making dua. Malik, the same, rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, what did he say? He said, I wish that this knowledge could be taken from me and no one ever hears my name. Sincerity, the heart. If you read the biography of one reviver of Islam, of one great Imam, you've read the biographies of all of them. Why? Because they all have similar traits and characteristics. What we take from their lives and details will prove to be the best form of nurturing and purification for ourselves and others. How do we know how to nurture others? By looking at the way that the others were nurtured. For example, we've heard of the madhab al-Hanbali, the Hanabila, the Hanbali madhab. How were the Hanabila raised? How were these great scholars raised? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, how did he raise his students? Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, how did he treat them? How did these great Imams become close to the level of Imam Abu Hanifa himself? What was the tarbiyah that these Imams gave to their students? Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, how did he become the great leader that he ended up becoming? He was raised by someone. He had a teacher, he had a mother, he had a father, he had someone that was in charge of him before he was put in charge of others. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, we know about his achievements, but who was it that raised him? Who was it that raised Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu? The Prophet alayhi salatu salam. And when I say raised, I don't mean literally from a child. I mean raised as in produced this great man by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar radiallahu anhu, he was under the the wing of Abu Bakr. Uthman was under the wing of Umar. Ali was under the wing of Uthman. And this is a sunnah that you find in our history. Having a murabbi, having someone that nurtures you, that teaches you. And this is something that you'll find in history. Role models for our children in regards to da'wah. Role models for our children. As today we find that our children are taking who as role models? Allahul Musta'an. You find 6-year-olds taking Peppa Pig as role model. We laugh, but it's the reality. Wallahi, it's reality. 6-year-olds, and they have an infatuation with a pig. And there's things which are worse than Peppa Pig. Creatures that don't even talk, Allahumma musta'an, in some of these TV shows. So why are we, as capable young men, not producing, and women, not producing alternatives for our children? It's very easy now. We have the technology to do it. And the youth, mashallah, tabarakallah, when they put their mind to something, they achieve it. Imagine the impact a person would have were he to look into the Islamic personalities and to produce series for young children. Comic strips for young children. Cartoons for young children. This would be a legacy that he would leave behind. Something that would enter into every single home. And children will benefit. Perhaps this series that he produces would be the reason for these children to become great men one day. He won't even know it. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, he'll come and he has rows of great men behind him due to the production that he produced for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we need to look for role models for our children. Political lessons. We can take political lessons from history. Understanding and knowing the course taken by our ummah and the relationships it had with other empires and nations, which falls under as-siyasa al-shar'iyya, which is a science which is studied. An example of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. Who can tell me which political role he had? Anyone? Before becoming a commander?
Governor.
Huh?
A governor.
A governor, where?
Egypt.
Under who? Someone whispered it. Under Fatimiyin. The Fatimiyin were what? Shia. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was a governor under a Shia state. But yet today you find individuals making takfir of other Muslims who are working with non-Muslim nations around them for the benefit of the Muslim people. And these ignorant young men, they make takfir of these individuals, not knowing that Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was a governor under the Shia rule of the Fatimiyin in Egypt. Would they also make takfir of Salah ad-Din? But history teaches us, history nurtures us, history gives us that balanced middle path understanding. It shows what dangers we face and how they can destroy our communities very quickly so that we can cut them off before it becomes too late. Sometimes, in a person who's not experienced in gardening, he'll go into his garden and he'll see a weed growing. He doesn't realize that what he sees is only the tip. There are deep roots under the ground. And so if he does not take this weed out quickly, the whole garden will become infested with weeds. And this is the same as some of the problems we have in our ummah. If we were to cut them from the beginning, they would not spread. If we do not cut them, we will only realize when it's too late. One of the biggest problems that we have today, racism and nationalism. Racism and nationalism. If we do not cut it, our generation, before it's too late, then we will suffer from it in the future. One of the reasons for the downfall of the Ottomans was racism and nationalism. And so by looking at history, we can see the impact of dangers, and we can realize, subhanallah, if we don't deal with this issue right now, in 10 years time we're going to have big problems. And so we know what to start tackling first. We don't argue about silly, unnecessary issues. Instead, we busy ourselves with the issues that are relevant to us and to our time period. And this is called basira. Having the ability to see ahead of time, to look at the ma'al, look at where things will lead to. And so this is one of the biggest benefits of studying history, and why we should have ihtimam and give history its due importance. We come to know the reality of the hukam of the past and their impact, and ridding some of the shubahat, the doubts about them and about our rulers. We come to know who our leaders were. Who were the hukam of Islam? Who was it that ruled the Muslim lands of the past? What were they like? And we come to rid some of the doubts that are thrown about in our time. And this is something which is very important. Of course, we can't go into the details right now. It's a vast topic in of itself. But it is very important. There are academic benefits. Actually, this one is very important. Politically, coming to realize the practicality of the Sharia and how vast and deep the political system of Islam is. Why? This is something which is thrown about very often. The Sharia, it's not, you can't implement it in our time period and so on and so forth. I'm not saying in the UK, put it in context. Yeah, the Sharia is this and that. But if you were to look at the past, you'll find how vast and how deep the Sharia actually is. It's not simply cut off a hand, stone a woman. La, the Sharia is a lot deeper than this. The Sharia is a lot more vast than this. The Sharia is a lot more accessible than that which is portrayed to us today. And we as Muslims, we are the bearers of the flag of Islam. And so we need to know the system of the flag that we bear. We need to be able to defend and show the beauty of Islam. Academic benefits. The academic benefits such as development of new sciences. As we mentioned, Ibn Khaldun, rahimahullah ta'ala, he extracted new sciences from history. The study of peoples, the study of nations. Here, for example, in anthropology, the relation between, and something you'll find which is amazing, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, certain character traits which are prevalent amongst certain nations. There's so much that can be taken from history. Present to the world the beauty and richness of our history.
Indeed, it is only the knowledgeable among His servants who truly fear Allah. Middle Path Radio, your source of Islamic knowledge.